Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. Recently, Bethesda released a very limited timeline for Starfield, hardly enough to count as a tease. And despite the breathless excitement about it from very fanish content creators, I found it rather underwhelming, something that has become sort of a pattern with the pre-launch publicity from Bethesda and I. But rather than just gripe, I thought I would use it as a launch point for discussing what makes for a compelling game world history and how it helps the game. Because honestly, this timeline looks like something banged together by a marketing guy who barely managed to pass high school history and hated every moment of it. Because lame history is a disconnected list of dates and events. A compelling history may have dates and events too, but what actually makes it compelling history is causes, consequences, and connections. It delves into both means and motivations. It has events both serious and serendipitous. It tells a story about the nature of humans and how we advance, with hints of the great mysteries that will still drive us forward. And by taking that much seemingly unnecessary work with background of the world and being open about it, sends a different message to potential users. Yes, we thought this through in such seemingly superfluous detail because we care about this. So you can too. You won't have to cook up fan fiction to make up for our own indifference to detail. So, for example, in Star Citizen, they've gone entirely to the max with the background information histories so that you can see a billboard for a torpedo burrito. And yes, you can look in the Encyclopedia and there is an entry on the torpedo burrito. Who markets it, when, and why, and what flavors are available. You can say, hey, I don't care about the torpedo burrito, and of course you don't. But the message is you can care if you want to, because CIG doesn't say, hey, it's just window dressing. The same thing goes for planets. Both Starfield and Star Citizen have comparable numbers of planets planned, but apart from a small handful, all we have on them are statistics, 90% uninhabitable, 10% habitable. On the other hand, look at the Lore Maker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you'll see system after system truly fleshed out of the history and major features. Yes, we don't have them yet, but the core message of having gone to all this work is one group really wanted to create 100 unique locations, and the others wanted to hit a number that the marketing department had set for them. That is the real point of building and publishing all that information and working hard to make it good. It says we care about the details. You can too. There are also other reasons why Star Citizen needed all this lore that Starfield didn't. Since Starfield is a single-player experience, if you imagine that a certain thing on a billboard is, it can be entirely different than what somebody else imagines it to be, and there's no conflict. In a multiplayer game, the reality of that billboard as advertising is the same for both of us, and we have the same reality. The other thing is that Squadron 42 is working with real actors, and real actors feel that they need to know everything about the scene. So, for example, if you're working with an actor in a scene and you say, hold this coffee mug, the first thing that they will likely ask you is, what's in here? And you better not say air, even if that is literally true. They want to know how full it is, how hot or cold it is it bitter or sweet, how many cups of this they have in a day, which one of the day is this? Because an actor thinks that all those things affects how they hold the cup that is actually empty. So it affects how, as a company, you think about the level of detail that is necessary in background information. So that is why history really helps in the game world. So let's then dig into the very bare bones timeline that Bethesda put out on Starfield. First, we have humans arriving in Mars at 2020. Reasonable. 50 years later, they're living in space. Who, where, and what did they mean by that? Technically, people are already living in space on the ISS, or maybe they mean the standard of planting crops and having some sort of self-sustaining systems.
They say that once you grow crops somewhere, you've officially colonized it. So, technically, I colonized Mars.
There seems to be plenty of room for some compelling storyline not undertaken. Next, humans arrive at Alpha Centauri. Now, currently, NASA has plans for an unmanned mission to Alpha Centauri for 2069 to mark the centennial of the moon landing. But even at 0.1c, a speed never before obtained, that would take 40 years for the probe to get there and another 4 years to get the information back from it. So in 2112, not enough time to build and launch a colony ship and have it travel back there. So therefore, somewhere in this time frame, faster-than-light travel was invented. Kind of an important detail to leave out there, isn't it? FTL, if it ever happens, will be one of the most significant events in the history of humanity, with all sorts of follow-on consequences. Yet they have somehow not thought to give it mention or they have really not thought about this at all. Now, Starfield has made a point of saying how accurate their astrophysics are. Alpha Centauri is a trinary star system. Regal Centaurus, or A, and Ptolemy, or B, orbit each other at an elliptical orbit of 88 years at a distance ranging from about the distance from the Sun to Saturn and the Sun to Neptune. Then Proxima Centauri orbits the two of them at a period of about 500,000 years. But this is not Proxima Centauri. That is a red dwarf, so the color of everything is off. Proxima Centauri is also a flare star, so also not a good place to live. Centaurus and Ptolemy are yellow and orange, so they are likely the candidates for the new Atlantis, and it is possible for there to be green zones around planets of this sort of binary pair at about 1 to 1.5 times the distance from Earth. But there would be challenges with tidal forces and climatological swings tied to the 88-year cycle of being closer or farther from the other star. And yet, practically at the edge of impossibility, mankind finds a perfectly suitable habitat with no need for terraforming at all. Such incredible luck. Or maybe it wasn't luck, but it appears that they didn't bother to really consider that in the timeline. Or maybe they did and decided that it wasn't worth mentioning in a timeline. 3 years later, the unified colonies are established. Colonies, plural. Either there are a bunch of other colonies we haven't heard of, or somebody has pretty ambitious plans. Who? Why? 1 year later, New Atlantis is made the capital of the United Colonies. Why? It can't be either the political, population, or economic center yet. Even if the Earth and its once billions of people is for some reason somehow not included in the history as a non-entity, why not Mars? Either the gravity drive allows travel in a blink and the distance is irrelevant, or some other forces are at work. But what? Then just 8 years after the founding of the United Colonies, we get Aquila City, the second named city that already does not want to be part of the United Colonies, of which there are no mention of any but one. Is this still just 11 years since any human stepped on a planet outside of Sol, from which we hear crickets? Then just 11 years later, Coe invites Foley. Who? Where? To join the Freestar Collective. And it appears to be just 5 years later that another unaffiliated colony around Narion. Who founded all these unaffiliated colonies? Why? What expansion has the United Colonies been undergoing? Who and how has that been pushed and funded? Yet this increasingly paradoxically named United Colonies, as it is neither united nor apparently containing many colonies, is New Atlantis, a planet with apparently only one city. Then, a mere 38 years after the first human steps on what would become mankind's first colony, they place an unwanted space station around what is, at an absolute minimum, the fourth established colony planet. Who and what is funding all this expansion? Why are the Narians so upset? What is it about the United Colonies that makes them so unwanted? What are they so concerned about the borders of UC, even though mankind is less than one lifespan from being on planets at all, when in fact the UC could expand in all directions, and with gravity drive could in fact leapfrog Narion entirely, expanding in that direction? So they fight a 20-year war over one system when one side is only 37 years old and the other side is only 8 years old. And apparently planets are easily found, and so many have in such a short time, travel is virtually instantaneous. Then 5 years later, the Freestar Rangers are found. Why? What did they need to fill that wasn't already met? Remember, the Freestar Collecting had just finished a 20-year-long war that ended in a stalemate, so they already had plenty of enforcements and logistics infrastructure. Then Constellation is founded. Elsewhere it's stated that because they felt the drive for exploration had waned. Why? Don't say it's because we ran out of planets and directions to look. And it's only been 225 years since the first footstep was made on Mars. That's a pretty short, grand period of exploration with the entire universe at our disposal. Then the Freestar Collective starts farming. Yes, and a whole extra interstellar war is started over some farmers, with the whole universe apparently still at our disposal. Like they wouldn't have put together in the last treaty some sort of bugling mechanism other than total war all over again? Does the gravity drive drain brain cells? So, after a completely unnecessary human tragedy, the war is ended after 4 years. Then apparently, as a result of a tactical exploit that the Freestar Collective used in that war, the UC creates an armed auxiliary. At the final line of this entry is fascinating. The ultimate reward, not the sign-up bonus, but what you might be able to get as the gold watch at the end, is citizenship. You have to be rich enough to build, crew, and pilot a warship for an extended time. What bennies does citizenship give you? It certainly can't be just a vote every 4 years and basic civil protections. And this one tiny line, which perhaps Field was just a quick crib from Starship Troopers, might just contain the seed of a meta-story for the entire Starfield universe. The conflict between democracy and extreme and likely kleptocratic oligarchy. But how did that get started? To happen so quickly and thoroughly, it would have to have been needed to be grounded in the initial command and financing of the colony ships sent from the Earth, backed by what, who, and why, and does that have anything to do why the Earth is MIA? But there's no indication of any of that, other than that one tossed-in comment likely cribbed from Starship Troopers. That brings me to my real impression, that Bethesda doesn't have interest, skill, or staff to work on a coherent storyline at a scale larger than an individual questline. And this timeline is something like a bare-bones Christmas tree that those ornaments of well-crafted questlines are hung from, rather than the approach of building a whole set of roots and sturdy trunk that branches can then be grown from. I've built a slick Utopia questline. Okay, hang it here. I have a dusty western frontier town questline. Okay, hang it there. I made an Aftermath of War questline. Well, hang it here. I made a Lone Ranger questline. Okay, hang it here. I made a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Explorers Club. Okay, hang it here. I made a Letter of Marque Privateer storyline. Hang it here. I made a questline for Sarah Morgan. Hang it here. I made a Filthy Rich Puppeteer questline. Hang it here. And then modders can hang their own ornaments to the same tree. But unless there's a strong trunk and roots of the tree, it just gets harder to see and even more wobbly. But to be honest, that approach works. It's worked for Bethesda's other successful games. But if you've really just approached this as Skyrim in space, you've missed that space is big. Not just big in having a large number of planets, but big in terms of having there be the great overarching story themes with causes, consequences, and connections, tying past and future together through means and motivations, the events that got us to where we are and drive us toward the future that will be. Maybe there'll be some of that when we finally obtain the last piece of the ring that has been teased. At least I can hope so. But I'm more afraid that it'll be a portal has been opened to another area of space you can continue to play here or pay $30 to go through and get the questlines in the Shattered Worlds expansion pack. And now for an update on our giveaways. First, we have the 10,000 subscriber thank you for the either $100 of Steam Store credit or the LTI Hull C, the Colossal Cargo Container Carrying Craft, to be given away when the C goes live, now scheduled for 3.20, just about going into Evocati testing. And then in November, the big annual IAE Week giveaway for your choice of the Galaxy Complete, the Massive Modular Mining Moving Medical Machine, or the brand new Big Box Bargain Bazaar called the Merchantman, or again, $100 of Steam Store credit. Just be a member and be entered automatically, or subscribe and comment with a secret word. And the secret word for this video is the food item I mentioned. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.